Let's get into some of the scenarios that the markets are facing right now. Everybody kind of woke up to what's going on with Credit Suisse. We see a lot happening in the space right now. Some of the things that kind of focus in on this: market capitalization of Credit Suisse at $22.3 billion a year ago, and its current market net worth now around $10.4 billion. So you're talking over half of its net worth essentially just stripped away from where the market is. When you look at things like that, Gareth, and you kind of consider the impact of what this may have on the overarching investment markets themselves, do you think this is a big deal?
I do think if Credit Suisse did go into default, I think that would be a big event, right? I mean, we remember Lehman. I don't think we could ever forget Lehman for those of us that traded through that period. And it was a dramatic and traumatic event for the overall investing public as we saw markets collapse. What I'm fascinated by today is that we're actually seeing Credit Suisse up on the day, even in spite of all this kind of chatter over the weekend. Yeah. Now, I know the heads of the company came out and defended it, but I do think all right, so check this out. The combination of this plus, and I know we'll talk about the economic data that we got today, but think about how the Fed may be forced to pivot, and could Credit Suisse be part of the reason that they're going to be forced to pivot? I do think you have to pay attention to everything right now. I mean, you look at what's gone on with the Federal Reserve, how they've raised interest rates from basically 25 basis points or 0.25% to where we currently are in such a short amount of time. And to me, it was always, and I know I came on a few weeks ago with you, we talked about this. It's silly to me to think that the Fed, how could they not think that there's going to be these ripple effects that are going to cause major issues, right? I mean, it's not like you're going, like Volcker went from 12 to 18%, 50% hike. Here you're going from 0.25% to 3.25%. It's a massive move that's going to rock the system. So again, these type of things, to me, it's going to force them to pivot. It really will.
Let's talk about timeline here. If we saw QT get the boot and we saw an easing start to flow in, this is something that I've looked at and spent hours and hours of research to try to figure out where would this happen. Would this happen possibly post election in November, or would we see something even prior to that here in October?
I think the next Fed meeting is the 2nd and 3rd of November or something like that. So I think that would be where we would start to see it. And I think the Fed will try to be super careful not to make it too obvious. Like I think you're looking at a 50 basis point hike instead of a 75, which will show that they're on the down slope. But I think, again, what we're seeing is the market's already starting to price this in, which I think is amazing. For instance, 10-year yield is falling today. The stocks market is rallying. So you're already getting the market to kind of jump on this bandwagon. Now, the question is, if we rally too much, does it then kick up the inflation again because of the wealth effect?
Gareth, I want to jump over to Bitcoin and the chart. So this is an angle right here that is looking at potentially a green October. And their theory is that if Bitcoin closes the week above support, are we in for a green October? And there's some numbers that they're kind of pointing to right now, which is consolidating in the 18.8 to around the 24.3 range. What are your thoughts on how your charts play out for October right now on Bitcoin?
So I'm actually relatively optimistic on Bitcoin right now. I'll pump up my chart here so we can take a look. And what you basically have is this beautiful wedge pattern connecting the lows to the highs here as well. And you can see that we're coming to a head. So what this tells me, when you come to a wedge pattern head, it means you're either going to have a breakout or a breakdown. I think with the dollar potentially topping and the Fed potentially at a pivot point, the short-term pressure is more likely to the upside. So I actually think you'll test this high-end range here. So right over here it would be. So right in this vicinity here, which is around 20,800. And if you can clear that, then I'm in the camp of a very strong October with upside potentially maybe to about 25,000.
Let's talk about Ethereum a little bit. Gareth, because there's some things happening here around Ethereum. You've got Ethereum seeing a surge in the number of new addresses. So there's a possibility here where we may see some movement on Ethereum as well. So new active wallet addresses climb to an all-time high. ETH also seen a spike in terms of social media engagements and mentions. This is something we track often within our own sentiment data. And then price was up slightly overall. And I think I just saw the chart on it. Looks like it's moving a little bit. Where are you seeing ETH in the month of October right now? now?
So number one, with the most addresses or adding the new active addresses, I'm assuming that has something to do with the merge. Probably the excitement around the merge got people really involved. So that's number one. That's always good, right? The more people involved, the better. Doesn't mean price is going to go up near term, but I think longer term, that is a bullish sign. And if we take a look at the chart here, what we can see is that Ethereum is kind of hugging this lower trend line. And you got this same sort of wedge pattern. It's a little bit of a different shape than the Bitcoin one, but nonetheless, you're hugging this line here, and you want to see Ethereum hold this 1260 level right here.
Yeah.
If it can attack the upside and break out, you got an easy upside target of around 2000 again. And again, you know, for me, it's the 2000 level is going to be tricky because you also have the daily 200 moving average up there, but that would be kind of my near-term best up case scenario before maybe some more downside.
Robert Kiyosaki, I don't know if you follow Robert, he is talking about Bitcoin finally is getting into a buying opportunity territory as the US dollar obviously being on the surge here recently. And he thinks that the dollar is going to crash by January. This is just 3 months away. And that's after a Fed pivot. What are your thoughts on that one? That's a big statement from Kiyosaki.
Yes, I agree. Down the line, at some point, the dollar will collapse. I think the dollar, like, you know, in fact, let me show you guys this chart of the DXY real quick here. I want to just show you guys this because this went right into the perfect analysis of what I was talking about. So, you know, look at this surge up in the dollar and then look at where it halted. And all you have to do is really just draw a trend line, and it gave you where the dollar was going to pull back from. But at the same respect, you have to understand that the dollar still has a lot of downside support. And what we can do is basically draw a trend line here as well. And so, yes, I think the dollar is going to pull back here, but this line here would be the bigger break point. But even if that happens, I mean, you know, currencies don't go from being the reserve currency of the world to like collapsing overnight, right? I mean, it doesn't work that way, right? Like Rome's deterioration happened over hundreds of years until it, you know, was no longer the superpower, just like most superpowers have. So I think it's important to recognize that it's great for headlines. And I do think the dollar eventually is no longer the reserve currency. But to say, I mean, it's going to collapse, I mean, what's the trigger for that? I mean, if the Fed is printing again, so is every other major, you know, economy in the world. You know, the ECB would be doing that. So would the Bank of, you know, I mean, so it's tricky, you know. Long term, I just love gold.
Gareth, are you in any trades right now? How are you kind of playing the current volatility that's happening today?
Yeah, so I definitely am in trades. I've been in gold. I'm loving the gold move today, folks. I mean, holy cow, about time. You guys know I've been a big fan of gold for quite some time, and we're finally seeing
Show
the crack
us a gold
on the dollar.
chart.
So just on gold alone, this is the trend line I'm watching. It's a beautiful trend line from the all-time high up here, which was that double top going back to 2020. So if we can break above that, that would get me even more excited. Right now, we're just trading in this range, but if we get above there, that would be exciting. The move on silver, by the way, holy cow. Look at that move on silver. That's a nice little short
completely broke out. What would cause silver to move like that? Because this is something we haven't seen in quite some time.
I did hear that silver squeeze was trending on Twitter over the weekend. So maybe some buyers coming out of the woodwork in that respect. And I also think a Fed pivot is not only important for bringing rates down, but it stabilizes the global economy, right? And I think the global economy, then that means the industrial demand for silver can increase as well, or at least get back on its feet. So I think that's part of it as well, is that the Fed pivot works on multiple levels, right? So Fed pivot works for gold and silver because they're a store of safety. So if the dollar declines, and then on the industrial side as well, it works.
One more topic here on XRP. Obviously, we saw a big jump in XRP, almost as much as what we saw with silver, if you kind of compare. But obviously, we've got a kind of a head-to-head face-off here with Gensler and Garlinghouse. But jumping 9%, XRP, we've been looking at this for quite some time. Sentiment has been trending up. Even at the current state in which it's in, which is a little bit kind of wobbly overall. What are your thoughts on where XRP might be heading right now?
I think as XRP goes, I mean, this is a lot more positive, what we saw here recently. So take a look at this chart. I think last time we talked about this huge wedge pattern, right? And look at what happened. Broke above it and you just ripped. And then again, just to show the beauty of how charts work, look at these pivot lows over here and then just put a trend line and you can see exactly where it stopped.